solemn. This is a current project in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I got to be goofy. I was invited to design a logo for this neighborhood called the North Side, and I thought it was silly for a neighborhood to have a logo. I think that's rather creepy, actually. Why would a neighborhood have a logo? Neighborhood has a thing. It's got a landmark. It's got a place. It's got a restaurant. It doesn't have a logo. I mean, what would that be? So I had to actually give a presentation to a city council and neighborhood constituents, and I went to Pittsburgh and I said, you know, really, what you have here are all these underpasses that separate the neighborhood from the center of town. Why don't you celebrate them and make the underpasses landmarks? So I began doing this crazy presentation of these installations, potential installations on these underpass bridges, and stood up in front of the city council and was a little bit scared, I have to admit, but I was so utterly unqualified for this project and so utterly ridiculous and ignored the brief so desperately that I think they just embraced it with wholeheartedness, just completely because it was so goofy to begin with. And this is the bridge they're actually painting up and preparing as we speak. It will change every 6 months, and it'll become an art installation in the north side of Pittsburgh, and it will probably become a landmark in the area. John Hockenberry told you a bit about my travail with Citibank. That is now a 10-year relationship, and I still work with them, and I actually am amused by them and like them and think that as a very, 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 very big corporation, they actually keep their graphics very nice. I drew the logo for Citibank on a napkin in the first meeting. That was the play part of the job. And then I spent a year going to long, tedious, boring meetings trying to sell this logo through to a huge corporation to the point of tears. I thought I was going to go crazy at the end of this year. We made idiotic presentations showing how the city logo made sense and how it was really derived from an umbrella, and we made animations of these things, and we came back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it was worth it because they bought this thing and it played out on such a grand scale and it's so internationally recognizable. But for me, it was actually a very, very depressing year. As a matter of fact, they actually never bought onto the logo until Fallon put it on its very good Live Richly campaign, and then everybody accepted it all over the world. So during this time, I needed some kind of counterbalance for this crazy, crazy existence of going to these long, idiotic meetings. And I was up in my country house, and for some reason I began painting these very big, very involved, laborious, complicated maps of the entire world and listing every place on the planet and putting them in and misspelling them and putting things in the wrong spot and completely controlling the information and going totally and completely nuts with it. They would take me about 6 months initially, but then I started getting faster at it. Here's the United States. Every single city of the United States is on here. And it hung for about 8 months at the Cooper Hewitt, and people walked up to it and they would point to a part of the map and they say, oh, I've been here. And of course they couldn't have been because it's in the wrong spot. But what I liked about it is I was controlling my own idiotic information, and I was creating my own palette of information, and I was totally and completely at play. One of my favorites was this painting I did of Florida after the 2000 election that has the election results swirling around in the water. I keep that for evidence. Somebody was up at my house and saw the paintings and recommended them to a gallery, and I had a first show about 2.5 years ago, and I showed these paintings that I'm showing you now. And then a funny thing happened. They sold, and they sold quickly and became rather popular. We started making prints from them. This is Manhattan, one from the series. This is a print from the United States, which we did in red, white, and blue. We began doing these big silkscreen prints, and they started selling too. So the gallery wanted me to have another show in 2 years, which meant that I really had to paint these paintings much faster than I had ever done them. And they started to become more political, and I picked areas that sort of were in the news or that I had some feeling about. And I began doing these things, and then this funny thing happened. I found that I was no longer at play. I was actually in this solemn landscape of fulfilling an expectation for a show, which is not where I started with these things. So while they became successful, I know how to make them, so I'm not a neophyte, and they're no longer serious. They have become solemn. And that's a terrifying factor when you start something and it turns that way, because it means that all that's left for you is to go back and to find out what the next thing is that you can push, that you can invent, that you can be ignorant about, that you can be arrogant about, that you can fail with, and that you can be a fool with, because in the end, that's how you grow, and that's all that matters. So I'm plugging along here. And I'm just going to have to blow up the staircase. Thank you very much.